What is happening, guys? Welcome back to Redbeard's Garage. And if you've been watching the channel since back in the day, you know one of our favorite things is mini bikes. We actually didn't start off liking mini bikes. We was against them for the longest time until we got our very first mini bike, which was the Coleman CT200U. Now, we did so many builds on those platforms. We did a tandem mini bike. We turned one into a trike. We put a lot of parts. We made a military themed mini bike. We did a ton with the Coleman mini bikes, but we eventually graduated to better things like the rear suspension model bikes and stuff, and we finally got completely away from them. Well, we've been noticing here lately that at every meetup about 50% of the people are on Coleman mini bikes, and I was like, man, we got to get back to our roots and do some more builds on Colemans, because that's the cheapest, most affordable, and the biggest mini bike that's out there. You can find them on Marketplace for super cheap. So we're going to be doing some build series on Coleman mini bikes again, to help out the people that are still riding them and try to make parts for them, and also just do some awesome builds. So with that being said, we're going to start the ultimate CT200U build right here on the channel today. So we got every part that we could find on Amazon. There's a couple sellers selling a ton of stuff, and when we was messing with the Coleman mini bikes, you couldn't get this much aftermarket parts for them. So we're super pumped to do this build. So what we're gonna do is jump right into it. We're gonna show you every single part that we have. Links for all these parts are in the video's description. They do help us out, so make sure to check out all these parts. Everything is from Amazon. This is going to be the ultimate CT200U. So after this video, we're going to start making a rear swing arm and start customizing this bike even further than the bolt-ons that we're doing today. So let's jump on the workbench. We'll show you everything we got in detail, and let's get them installed. One big upgrade we got is this front suspension kit. This is going to be one of the biggest things on this bike, because if you've ever rode one, you know they ride like a brick. Since the front end changes the height of the frame, we got this kickstand that is matched to the new lift. The front end kit came with some handlebars, but I think these ape hangers are going to fit the build that much more. With our new front suspension, we also got a front hydraulic disc brake kit. This is going to be massive on the stopping power of this bike. We picked up a Springer seat kit because there isn't any rear suspension kits on the market yet, so I think this is going to give us that little bit more comfort that we need on this bike. This diamond stitch seat will look real nice on that Springer seat kit. Another big upgrade is the rear disc brake kit. The factory drum brakes can't handle hard riding, and you're constantly adjusting them, so that's going to solve this problem. We also got a hitch kit. Don't know what we'll tow, but we're going to tow something. I hate the factory tanks being on the engine, so this under the frame stainless steel tank will hold more gas and be easier to fill. And it's going to look sick. Now on to the performance of the bike. We got this long tube stainless steel header with an aluminum muffler, so we're hoping it sounds good on that Tillotson 225 that we're installing. Since we're running that performance engine, we also got this VM22 kit just to fit the whole Amazon build. There's no way I'm installing the clutch setup back on this bike like it had originally, so you know we had to go with a Super 30 Series kit. If you run a CVT kit on these bikes, then you have to get the 1-inch risers for the engine to make it clear the frame. The last piece of this build is a 62 sprocket, and that's really going to help it come out of the hole and climb hills if we do any off-road riding on this bike. The first thing we need to do is strip this bike almost completely down. The only thing I'm not going to take off is the complete rear rack. I did get a brand new rack because I didn't know what bike we was going to find. A lot of these bikes didn't come with a rear rack, but pretty much the only thing that's going to stay on is the rear fender, the rear rack. Everything else is getting taken off. So let's get it stripped down so we can build it back up into the ultimate Coleman CT200U.
First, I'm going to install the forks. Use the bolt with the thick washer and install through the top triple clamp, followed by a small washer on the bottom side of the triple clamp. Then install another small washer followed by the bottom triple clamp. Make sure the stops are facing up and install another large washer and the nut on the bottom side. Now I can slide in the forks and install the bolts. Make sure the bolt cutout is facing the bolt and tighten everything up, starting with the neck tube bolt. Install the front fender mount on the bottom of the lower fork and then install the fender. Next, you're going to install the handlebars. Now I'm going to install the Springer seat kit. I can get to the gas tank mount before mounting the actual cushion of the seat.
Now this gas tank is not exactly made for the CT200U. It's made for the CT200U-EX. It will fit this one, but you do have to modify it from what I've found. So basically I have the plate exactly where I wanted it. And what I did was I drilled a hole in the stainless plate that lined up with the bracket for the Springer seat. Now you can see that hole, I had to take a Dremel. I actually need to straighten this a hair bit. But I had to take a Dremel and take out a little bit of the steel that's welded to the frame because it was blocking like half of this hole. Now I can raise the gas tank underneath, drop a bolt down front and rear and tighten it up. And then we can put the Springer seat on last. So you will have to drill this hole. I think he should change it and modify the tank a little bit. If he put this bung a little further back and then went ahead and installed this hole in there, it would have worked out perfect. But that's how it had to be. Had to drill that, open the red metal that's welded the flat stock, basically this piece that rides underneath it, had to take off a little bit with the Dremel. Oh yeah.
Now install the two seat plates on the bottom of the new seat and bolt it onto the brackets. With the front brakes, slide the bolt through the brake mount. Use the included washers on inside of the fork on each side of the wheels. Use the shorter bolts and spacers in the kit to install the fork clamp bracket. Now you can install the fork clamp. Now we can use the longer spacers and bolts to install the caliper to the mount. slide on the brake lever onto the throttle side of the handlebars for the front brakes.
So we have a bunch of different parts for this rear hitch and the new tire. So this is going to be a challenge, especially by myself. So we're going to use the bolt. Since we have multiple kits, we're going to use the bolt that came with this hitch because it's the longest. So the bolt goes in first, then it goes into the rear rack. Then we put a spacer. Then we put the chain tensioner. A lot of pieces here. Then it can slide in. Then we put another spacer on the inside. Then we put a washer with the spacer. And I'll show you this entire order of everything once we're done. It's very hard to do this with a voiceover or anything. And now we can slide the wheel in, sprocket on this side, and then we can do the same thing on the other side. Spacer, washer, spacer, slide the bolt through, chain tensioner, spacer, slide the bolt through both hangers, if that makes any sense. I'm out here by myself, so this may be a challenge. See what happens. All right, wasn't that bad. Now I gotta see what order this goes on. So once I get all this put together, I'll show you in what order it all went together. All right, so I have the hitch all installed. Now you will have to bend these out a little bit because they're bent in, but basically, I'm gonna try to show this. It goes bolt, then through the trailer hitch, then through the rack mount, spacer, adjuster, spacer, washer, rim. Then we jump over to this side. And again, it goes washer, spacer, brake mount if you're doing the hydraulic rear brake, adjuster, spacer, then rack mount and hitch. So you will have to drop this bar and bolt it up here to get to the upper bolt on the caliper. It comes with spacers that go behind here, steel spacers. It's kind of hard to see because they're all black, but steel spacers go on behind this bracket, and then the Allen's thread, you know, through all that into the caliper. So we have it all mounted. Of course, nothing's adjusted because we don't have the engine on there. So next, it's been a long time since I messed with one of these bikes. I see a lot of people don't even, like, you don't need to cut this off or this. Most likely I'm gonna go ahead and get rid of this because I'm not ever gonna use it. It's just in the way. And I most likely will get rid of this as well because we're not gonna use that with what we're gonna do in the future of this bike. I do have some new foot pegs because I do not trust these aluminum ones. We used to break them all the time back in the day. So they should be in the mail today. So we can do the engine next. Unfortunately, we did get this style. They do make an engine riser that's all sheet metal that's nicer quality than this because this is just a piece of square tubing. This is cheaper, but I think I'll swap it out later with the actual steel riser. But you do have a little chain adjustment here. So when you bolt your engine down, you need to go ahead and cut your chain with your engine all the way back so you can pull the engine forward because there's not a ton of adjustment on these bikes on the actual chain adjuster. So make a note of that before you do this. So another thing is this kickstand we got appears to me that it's the exact same size. So I may swap it out anyways just to see, but it looks exactly the same length. It needs to probably be a little longer now with the front suspension on it. Where before the thing stood straight up and wanted to fall over with you. That was the downside to the Colemans. They put too long of a kickstand stock on them, but once you put the front suspension and lift up the front, you know, it kind of works against you. So we'll get the engine put on and then we're pretty close to the first ride. We got the brake lever installed. We ran the cable along through the forks right there, and then we went along the top of the frame because the cable wasn't quite long enough to go down and up like we do on most of our bikes.
Jeepers, mister, you're really strong.
One of the last pieces is the header and the muffler. The muffler mounts to the original chain guard tab using a stud standoff.
All right, so how we normally do these builds is once we finish everything, do the voiceover, we take it out and do the beauty shots, and then we get it running, make sure everything's good, and 99% of the time our engines are dialed in, they run great. Well, we end up not using the carb kit that we got from Amazon because I remembered we're going to have to run a pulse pump on this engine, and those are not set up for a pulse pump, so there's no way we'd get it to work without doing this whole regulator type deal we had to used to have to do back in the day. So we end up slapping the same exact carb, just a Wildcat version of it, which is blueprinted and tuned with a pulse pump. Well, this thing would not start good, and I'm telling you guys, our engines, we rarely ever have issues starting. This thing took like 40 pulls to get started, so I knew something wasn't right, and I was like, okay, maybe the valve lash wasn't set as well as I thought. Now this is Lonnie's old 225, so it has some time on this block. Then we slapped a Wildcat Hemi head on it that we had sitting on the shelf because it was already ported. I was like, we'll run that. And well, we got it started, tried to run it, it just wouldn't run it. It was like the carb was extremely lean and it was just bogging like crazy, which didn't make any sense. So I put a different carb on it. I was like, okay, maybe that one's gummed up from sitting on the shelf. Same exact issue, so I knew it wasn't the carb. Then I made sure the fuel tank was venting, because if your fuel tank vapor locks, then it can't flow fuel. You'll get, some similar issues. Made sure the head was torqued, rechecked the valve lash, and then I was outside leaning it over on the kickstand so I could free rev it. I was up there in RPM, just holding her to the wood, and dropped the valve. So I don't know what it damaged, but most likely damaged some stuff. So I don't know if maybe I got pissed in the valve clearance. I wouldn't think so, because this is not a milled head. And you can even be, zero in the hole, but you can see the intake valve is in there and she stuck. So the piston definitely smacked the valve when it happened. I don't know if the keepers wouldn't fully set or something. It's very strange, because valve lash was set, everything was great. So unfortunately, we're gonna have to pull this engine off right after finishing the build. The bike looks freaking sick. We're gonna go over at the end of this, after riding it and stuff, what I think about these bikes now that's been 7-8 years, and how I feel about them with all these upgrades and without the upgrades. But so I went to the shelf, the boneyard, and I pulled off this Coleman engine that we did the video on a while back. We put a cast aluminum flywheel, I think a 265 cam, a billet rod, maybe even an EC forged rod actually in it, and ported the head, and it made okay power. I'm going to tell you, when this was halfway running, this bike had way too much power. That 225 was a Haas, so it did not need that much power. These frames, it's just short wheelbase, and wanted to ride a wheelie, dangerous. So unfortunately, I'm going to have to pull that engine, slap this on, but that's an original Coleman engine off the B200 RSV, so it kind of fits it, and we'll slap that on. We're going to use the Wildcat carb, just move it over to this, and then we'll dissect this on a later video to see what happened with it. We'll see if it damaged the piston and how bad everything's hurt. So let's get this swapped out.
A few moments later.
All right, let's test this thing out, see if it's any better.
don't like the both bumps. So that wasn't that bad. I mean, yeah, so definitely these parts make this bike absolutely rideable. This thing is, so this is the worst mini bike in a full-size mini bike, not counting the MM80s and stuff like that. This definitely made such a, like this is actually rideable now. Before they beat you to death so bad. This is an expensive build. So what we're going to do is talk about the pros and cons of all these parts, any modifications I had to make these things work. So let's get it in the garage and we'll go over everything.
All right, so I'm going to give my honest opinion on the ultimate Coleman CT200U build. So basically, if I was to rate mini bikes from 1 to 10, 1 being the absolute worst unrideable bike and 10 being the best it could possibly be, this bike without all these modifications is honestly like a 4. I hate these bikes more than anything in their stock form. That's why we quit messing with them so long ago. I've seen people break the neck tubes. We never rode them that hard off-road because we didn't like them. Of course, no suspension. And the older I get, the more it hurts the next day after riding these things off-road. So you got to think, when we stopped messing with these, no one was really supporting them. There was a few bolt-on performance kits in the CVT kit, but other than that, no one had anything else like these Amazon companies are doing. So it's pretty cool that you can do this much stuff. Now, I know this was a very expensive build, being around a little under $1,400, probably be over $1,400, closer to $1,500 to do all these parts, not counting the performance parts, because of taxes and shipping and stuff. Almost everything, I think everything was prime purchases. So you can get free, 2-day shipping on it. But with all these parts, I seriously rate this bike probably around a 7. So if a Trailmaster, which is our favorite mini bike, it's really good out of the box, you do have to do a few things to make it just a little bit better. If it is a 9, that's what I would consider that bike. This is a 7 after all these parts you put on. This is actually rideable off-road, and I didn't think it would be. I didn't think it was going to change it that much, but it's actually really decent. Now, you can't go as fast as you can on an MB200 off-road on this bike, even with all these parts. But all in all, it made a massive difference. Of course, the biggest being the Springer seat, the front forks, and the hydraulic disc brakes. That completely changed this bike. Now, the gas tank is optional. You do have to modify some stuff to get it on there, like I showed in the video. And if you're not running a Springer seat, I think you probably wouldn't be able to mount it easily. It'd be very frustrating to mount that gas tank because it would block one of the bolts and it'd just be frustrating. So I definitely think if you're going with that gas tank, you'd have to drill that hole like I did, mount the plate, then mount the tank, then put the rest of the seat on. That would be the way to do it. But of course, the hydraulic brakes, the shocks, that's what completely changed this bike. And the handlebars, actually, I didn't know if I'd like those 8-fingers, and they're actually really good. I'm going to put that cross brace on it because you can tell, like, if you jump something or hit something hard enough, it feels like they could bend, so I would put that definitely on there if you go with these handlebars. And I'll put those linked in the video description because we have ordered them. Now, what we didn't show is I didn't know they made peg kits for these. Back in the day, we used to put CR80 steel foot pegs on them. We'd have to do a few modifications. Well, these actually bolt right on. They come with a different sets of springs and pins depending on the bike that you use. But these, that made a huge difference because I actually trust these more than those cheaper ones that come factory on these bikes because they're known to collapse down on you. I still wouldn't put a lot of faith in these, but they're a lot better than what's on there, and they're well worth the $15 price. Now, we also use the Amazon, the chain that came with the chain cutter. You'll see it linked in the video description. Now, it is one of the cheaper 420 chains. If I was running a lot more power or as big as I am, I'd probably go with the DID chain if you're trail riding because I wouldn't want to get out in the trail. That chain stretched a lot in the first ride, which you can see here. It was completely tight when we started. So that stretched a lot. So you're going to get that out cheaper chain. You could tell by the feel of it that it was thinner chain, but for most people riding in a subdivision or something like that, that chain's going to be sufficient, and you get a free chain brake with it, and you get like 6 master links. So it's actually a really good deal for that setup. But again, if you're doing a lot of hard riding, I would go with a better grade chain. Now onto the hydraulic rear brakes. We have no problems out of the front, but factory, you're going to want to make sure to put the support bar to your rack on the outside and put the hitch on the inside, because what it did was the pin housing on the caliper was hitting that bar. So the back brakes did not work whatsoever when I first got on the bike. I mean, they would compress and everything, but what it was doing was not letting the pad or the caliper float. And so you got to make sure that you have enough room between that bar and the caliper shown on screen. So just make sure you double check that if you run the hitch kit. If you don't run the hitch kit, you'll probably have to put a spacer on that to space it out. I don't know if the guy that makes these parts have noticed that, but that's definitely a thing that you're going to have to do, is watch out for that caliper hitting that bar. Other than that, the gas tank, of course, we had the issues of putting it on. We showed how to fix it. Can't run it without a Springer seat. In my opinion, it could probably be fixed. He could probably do some modifications, the company that's making these, and fix that. But all in all, we got it to work because of running the Springer seat. We did have to run a pulse pump. That is one thing you're going to have to do, is run a pulse pump because of the fuel tank, the where it's got a low output. So you're going to want to make sure you have a carburetor that can handle fuel pressure. This carburetor is kind of on the fence. It wants to handle it, but once you go from full throttle and idle back down, it wants to spit and hesitate to go back in throttle because it's kind of flooding out the carb. That's one thing you probably have to run. You'd have to find the needle and seat that's more suited for it. Or, you know, that's the biggest thing, is changing out your needle and seat for a fuel pressure rated one. And basically the hole is smaller in the needle and seat. The seat has a smaller hole in it. But all in all, I think these parts are actually really good. The exhausts sound way better than I thought it would. Now, I do think that muffler, you know, would last you a year or so and then fall apart. They are a cheaper style muffler, but for the price, it's not that bad, to be honest. And you would want to header wrap it. It isn't close to your leg, but you could burn yourself easily. So definitely wear blue jeans when riding with this exact header, because it is close to your leg there and you can swap it on it. But I would just wrap it in some header wrap and it wouldn't be a big deal. But it does sound really good. Now we're going to later tow something on this old hog and see how the bike handles weight. I know I had to set way up here on the seat because it wanted to ride a wheelie with me. It's still a short wheelbase mini bike. I would like to put the extended axle hangers that push the tire back, but really you'd want to push it back like 4 inches to really make this bike suitable for a lot of horsepower. Or if not, you're just going to have a wheelie happy, and it's going to make the front end light, which is not going to handle great in the trail. So I would keep it around this horsepower that we built this Coleman. We have linked that Coleman engine build in the video description so you can see the dyno and the buildup of it. Pretty simple build, ported head. It's got 26-pound springs. We put a 265 cam. We put a rod in it, a forge rod from EC, and a billet fly. No, we put the cast aluminum flywheel to keep it budget. So check that out. So let us know what you think on the ultimate Coleman CT200U build. I think it turned out awesome, and it's actually a way better bike now, which makes sense. You spend this much money on it, you would expect it. But I was very skeptical starting this video because we knew how bad these bikes are. So I highly recommend checking it out. The tires seem to grip good. It's the first time using this X profile tire. We might try them out on other mini bikes in the future, but let us know what you think and what you want to see us do to this bike next. We're listening because we're putting out a mini bike Monday every single Monday. Thank you guys so much for watching. Make sure to check out those links in the video's description. They help us out to continue to do videos like this. We have a MM80 style build coming next. We're going to do a review of a brand new Oryx Earth bike off of Amazon. Then we're going to fully do all the parts to it. So let us know what you'd like to see done to it as well in the future. We love you guys, and God bless.